or I should say engineer, who actually made very important contributions. And he worked for the Westinghouse Corporation in the United States. And according to him, the power electronics, it encompasses the three main disciplines, as you can see on this diagram. And it is taken straight from this introduction to solid state power electronics, which are basically nothing but the notes which were actually left by Professor Neville before he passed away. So you can see that when you say power electronics, it is actually encompassing, you can see power, where you have both the rotating equipment and the static equipment. You have the control, very major component comes from control, where you talked about both discrete time or the sample data systems or the continuous data systems. And you also have this electronics, which is the main workhorse. As I said, electronics, you basically try to do power conversion by using electronics means. And electronics is giving us the devices and the circuits. So this is what it is contributing to power electronics. So together, all these major branches or the fields, they actually encompass or constitute what is called power electronics. Okay, so in a very general, very general and basic form, I've just shown one switching matrix. And what you can see here is that there are some input lines. I've shown here 4, but these could be in general M lines. Similarly, you can see on the right side, there are 4 output lines. Okay, so basically you apply electrical signals to the inputs and you actually get, some output at the output lines, depending on how you switch this 4x4 switching matrix. Now the question is that I'm sure everybody knows that it is because of this switching that we actually have all the problems. Problems in the sense that, you have, for example, losses in the system. You have the discontinuity in your current and voltage waveforms because there is switching. All right. And there are several other complexities which come. And usually these switches are, these devices which are mounted on heat sinks to make sure that their temperatures are stable. Okay, so that is another very important and complex issue, thermal management. But why do we need these devices? Why do we need switching? Why do we need all these switches? Well, the point is that there is something on the right side, on the output lines, that we want to control. For a given set of input signals, or for a given input, on the input lines, I want to control something on the output line. Now, this could be my voltage, current, or anything that actually is a byproduct of current and the voltage that appears in the output of the switching matrix. So how do you do that? You do it by switching these devices, these switching matrices, various switches in this matrix. You switch them in a specific manner and you keep them on and off for specific durations, which actually depend on your control algorithm that will determine what you actually get at your output. So this is the most general form of any power electronic circuit, any power electronic system. And no matter how complex it is, and no matter what application it has been used for, it will always can be fitted into this kind of a switching matrix. Okay, so basically, if you look at in a very broad way, I can say from this paper by T.G. Wilson, that, you have an AC or DC source and you have loads, okay, to which you want to feed desired power. The AC or DC source on the left side is not the one that you want to feed these loads. In fact, you want to feed something else here. Okay, so this power electronics switching networks, which I just showed you, this network, it presents a variable impedance network to the source, and therefore you can actually, by modifying this network, by modifying the switching matrix, you can actually control the output that appears across the various loads, loads 1, 2, and so on. So this is just another representation of a power electronic system. Now, very quickly, because you're using switches, okay, and I said that, these switches, apart from controlling what you want to control, they also leave gaps in the voltages and the currents. And these gaps basically are not really desirable as far as the loads are concerned. They're also not desirable if they are actually drawn from the input side, because it will affect the input side other loads which are connected to the input side, for example. So what you do is you put what are called energy buffers. In other most common name for the energy buffers is the power filters. So you actually put power filters here, whose job is to actually store the energy and then use it to bridge these small gaps which actually come or which arise due to the switching of these various switches of the switching matrix. And this is the most general block diagram of a power electronic system. I don't want to harp on very general things of power electronics, but these are just a few basic slides which I introduced just to basically refresh and review some of these things, so that we can then start with some of the other major concepts, the bigger concepts. So typically power electronic system would have a power converter sitting at the heart of it, and it will be usually consisting of a switch, okay, an inductor and a capacitor and so on. These are the elements which will be there inside the power converter. Remember, there is no place for a resistor in a power converter, because it is basically an element which causes loss of energy. We are not looking for anything that will cause losses in power converters or in power electronic systems. So basically, if you talk about the resistor, it will appear only at a very few places, generally at the load, the load which is fed by the power converter. So you can see that the electrical output coming out from this power converter, which is nothing but the output lines I showed in the general switching matrix. Okay, so out of that, let's say you want to control some voltage or current. You feed that voltage, you use a voltage or a current sensor. You use this feedback signal and you take it to what is called a controller. Now, this is an electronic controller. And typically, in the 60s and 70s, when the microprocessors and the microcontrollers came, this used to be some very basic controllers or processors. But now, as the time has passed, the power converters have become more complicated, and everything else that we are trying to do has become more complex and complicated, including our control schemes. We need more sophisticated controllers. And today, we have a huge range because of the big revolution in the electronics. We have a big range of controllers that also includes digital signal controllers or the digital signal processors, DSPs. I'm sure many of you would have heard about it. So basically, you feed back your signal into the controllers, and the controller then takes a decision as to what to do with the converter to make sure that the electrical output is adjusted in the right direction. So it gives you the right kind of output. Okay. So this is how a typical power electronic system would look. And in fact, any power electronic system will fit this particular description without fail. Only thing is that it may have a large number of outputs. It may have a large number of elements that you see around it. The power converter itself may be much more complicated than the way it has been drawn here and so on. But the basic representation would remain the same. Just before I depart from these basic slides over to more major topics that I wish to do, very quickly, I want to remind you that there was a time when we had only diodes. Okay, and that was a time, very initial time of 40s and 50s, when the semiconductor technology just came in. Okay, and we just had diodes. But as you can see, diodes are not controllable. So a diode will conduct the moment it is forward biased. So there was no way you can control the power using a diode. So an uncontrolled switch or the diode was an example of this. But as the time passed, people came up with the first controllable power device, which was the silicon control rectifier, which belongs to the thyristor family. And it actually gave you partial control in the sense that you could actually turn it on, all right, by giving a pulse to its control terminal, but you could not turn it off by giving a signal to its control terminal. So it was, it was like a car which you could start, but whose brakes don't work. That is a kind of switch the thyristor or the SCR is or was. So because of these difficulties, there was some very specific techniques which were required or which were used to basically control the thyristors to turn them off. And these were actually called the commutation schemes. There were several commutation schemes which people came up with time. But as the semiconductor technology, semiconductor physics advanced, people were able to make very nice, fully controllable devices as well. And a transistor, a bipolar junction transistor, which I'm sure you know very well from the, at least from the small signal point of view. I'm sure many electronics experiments that you have actually, in fact, you have been involved with, where you use these transistors. So these transistors, they started coming in high power. Now, one of the things that makes power electronics different from electronics is that electronics is usually at low power. We talk about only a few volts and few milliamperes. But when we talk about power electronics, we're talking about at least a few amperes, at least, and at least a few tens of volts. So this is what power electronics difference is with electronics. So with the advent of the fully controllable switches like the bipolar junction transistors, okay, it's not that the efforts stopped, and the efforts continued, and they still continue to actually come up with more advanced switches, more advanced power devices which could be used as switches. And what was the objective of these switches? Since they are coming in the path of the circuit, they should not cause losses, or they should not cause a lot of losses. So one of the objective was, how to make them efficient. Secondly, the objective was that they should be able to switch fast enough. Okay, otherwise there are issues. Otherwise they will delay. If they're taking long time to turn on and turn off these switches, they will take time. Not only being controllable, they also need to have acceptable rise time and the fall times during switching. So you can see that in this particular line, in this particular domain, the BJT, the bipolar junction transistor, first that came, and then it was followed by what is called the insulated gate bipolar transistor, which was nothing but a combination of the BJT and field effect transistor. And then MOSFETs came, the metal oxide semiconductor field effect transistors, the MOSFETs. They came and they were available at power ratings that are required in power electronic circuits. And these were, remember, the BJT, the IGBT, the MOSFETs, they're all perfectly controllable switches. Now, in the last few years, continuing with the same trend, people have now been able to, there are companies, there are industries which have been able to commercialize some even newer and better switching devices. And these are the devices which are made up, which use of not just the silicon, which most of these earlier devices did. Okay, the diodes, the silicon controlled rectifiers, and the BJTs, and the IGBTs, and so on of the earlier days, earlier times. They're all used silicon as a semiconductor material. But these newer switches which have appeared the last few years, these are actually using other types of semiconductor material. One of them is the silicon carbide, and the other is the gallium nitride. Now, the advantage with these particular devices is that, unlike the silicon, these are having a wide energy band. Okay, so these are, that's why they are actually called wide band gap devices. Okay, so you might have heard about this terminology, I'm sure quite a few times, and also would have read about them in the articles related to power electronics. Now, the advantage with these newer devices is that they are less lossy. And I think their biggest advantage is that they can actually operate at a very high frequency compared to a silicon device, and yet produce very low losses. So that is a very nice and very big advantage of these two. And research is still going on. These devices are still evolving. And mind you, gallium nitride and silicon carbide are not the only semiconductor compounds which are being used. There are others which have been contemplated, which have been used and experimented with. But these are the ones which have emerged as probably the most important ones. So don't be surprised if in the coming years you come across some even better, smarter devices. Okay, so now let us come to the other important applications of the power electronics that I want to cover here. One of them is the very interesting aspect where we try to use the two-level inverters and we tried to actually, uh, in terms of configuration and control, we make them mimic what are called the multi-level inverters. Now, I'm sure you know that the difference between a two-level inverter and a multi-level inverter is that the output of voltage of a two-level inverter, okay, it will have just two levels, okay. So I'm sure you know about a half bridge or a full bridge two-level inverter. And a multi-level inverter, on the other hand, the output voltage will have many levels. It will have 3, 5, 7, and so on, like this. Another extension of this is of the multi-level inverters is the modular multi-level converters, which actually can be used for a range of applications, as it turns out. And we are going to look at one small application here of the offshore wind farms. So we actually try to carry the power from an offshore, a windmill, and through an HVDC link, you draw this power onto the shore, and you try to connect it with the AC grid, which is there on the land. Okay, so that is the application that we look at that. And then I'll also show you a little bit about grid support, because these days people are talking a lot about the what are called distributed generation systems, where you try to basically, as you know, feed power through your solar PV, wind, or any other source into the grid. Uh, there are some support activities or features which are expected from the grid, in such cases, and one of them is a low voltage right through, which is actually a very important requirement to prevent tripping of the system during some false tripping or false alarms or faults. Okay, so we will look at these. I'll start with the first one. And now the thing is, when we say two-level inverters mimicking multi-level inverters, so what we'll see here is that we'll use two-level inverters only because they are much simpler in control as well as configuration. But we'll see how we can get the properties and the features which are similar to multi-level inverters. Okay, so just to jog your memory a little bit, this is a very conceptual diagram which shows how multi-level inverter would work. And I just keep this stylus with me all the time so that I can show you. If I want to mark something, I can show. And here, so you can see that there is an input source which has been split into, as you can see, 1, 2, 3, and all the way to 7 subsections. It could be many more. It could be many. This is just an example. And you can see here this particular block, and there are 3 terminals coming out from there, A, B, C. And these represent the 3 phases, and actually they can be connected to anywhere on these sections of the input side. So you can see that this is some sort of a slider arrangement. This is some sort of a potential meter, you can say, and there's a slider which is actually sliding across it. So depending on where it touches this particular this arc, it will actually have that much of voltage across the terminal A, B, or C. On the right side is actually the practical implementation of such a system. So basically, the left side one is a very basic representation of a multi-level inverter. And on the right side is actually an actual representation of a multi-level inverter. So you can see that there are many switches. Many switches are there. And depending on how we switch them, we actually get the kind of voltages that we want at A with respect to O. By the way, if I see this point A here, the voltage of A with respect to O is the common mode voltage. Similarly, B, sorry, I should say pole voltage, not common mode voltage. Pole voltage. B, okay, whatever is the voltage with respect to 0, that is the pole voltage. So basically, depending on this location of this slider arrangement, you will have the various pole voltages. And what you see at point A, so similarly, you'll have other 2 phases also, B and C. They will actually give you the stepped waveform at the output. So you can see that these are multi-level outputs, typical of a multi-level system. A 2-level inverter would have these kind of outputs. A multi-level inverter has at least a 3 or more number of levels as shown here. Now, why I'm talking about all this? So let us just define what is called the common mode voltage. And it is a common mode voltage in terms of which the multi-level inverters give a lot of advantage. So you will see that compared to a two-level inverter, a multi-level inverter, it actually gives us a reduced common mode voltage. So to understand this, let us just very quickly see that the pole voltages of the phase B, phase A, phase B, and phase C, which I have just told you. PA is nothing but A with respect to 0. PB is nothing but B with respect to 0. So these are called pole voltages. And all these voltages, when they are actually put in the form of a matrix like this, it's called a pole voltage matrix, consisting of the pole voltages of the three phases. Now there is another term which we introduce, which is called the pole voltage index. So you have a pole voltage index of phase A, you have a pole voltage index of phase B, and for phase C. And it is actually obtained by dividing each of the pole voltages, PA, PB, and PC, by this smallest voltage on this section. Okay, that is measurable, that you can quantize and present as a number, as a non-fractional number. Okay, so as you can see, this is the minimum voltage that you can see for each section. So if you divide each of these pole voltages by Vx, you actually get the pole voltage index. And finally, you can just write here the common mode voltage. Now, common mode voltage is a very important concept because it determines the performance of your inverter in terms of, let's say, how much leakage current it will actually cause when you connect it to a load or when you connect it to a grid. And in the recent times, you might have heard about these things when you talk about the transformer-less systems. So these inverters usually have a transformer to basically step up or step down their voltages. But because of the bulkiness of the transformer, people are now trying to build what are called transformer-less systems. So in the common mode voltage, which actually causes a leakage current to flow in the system, that is becoming now prominent because there is no transformer. So there is no basically breaking of the path of this leakage current. This leakage current would flow. So special precaution is required to reduce or eliminate the leakage current. And that's why there is a need to understand this. So from here you can see common mode voltage, as we've seen, is PA plus PB plus PC divided by 3. So all the three pole voltages of three phases divided by 3. And if you just now you write it in this way, PA by Vx, in this way you just add them. So what I've done is just divided each of these by Vx and we have multiplied them by Vx. So this Vx by 3 is nothing but, we actually call it just a proportionality concept. Constant, and this particular bracket term, it is actually called the common mode index. Okay, so this we've just got. Now we'll see what we mean by this and why I have tried to show all this. So we got an expression for the common mode voltage by the basic definition, and then we have actually written an expression which is now in the terms of common mode index that we have defined before. Okay. Now let us just see an example. Let's say this is a three-phase multi-level, three-phase multi-level inverter. A, B, C are the three phases. A, B, C are the three phases which are connected. Let's say at these positions. So 2, somebody is connecting at 7, and something is connected at 3. All right. So you can see that if you want to write down, just like the previous slide, I told you the pole voltages. You'll find that the pole voltages of A will be 7 Vx. Look at the location on the left side diagram, 2 Vx and 3 Vx. You can see that these are the three elements of this matrix. And then if you just try to find the pole voltage index, and basically just nothing, as you realize if you actually do it in more details, you can actually very easily correlate it with the space vector matrix. So you will see that these are actually nothing but the space vectors. This is the space vector. If you can see that I've just rewritten this 7, 2, and 3, which is in terms of the pole voltage indices. And then by writing the definition of the common mode voltage, you know that the pole voltage of A, pole voltage of B, pole voltage of C, 7 Vx plus 2 Vx plus 3 Vx, you add them and divide by 3, you get the common mode voltage. And if you do that here, you can actually see in terms of the proportionality constant that this is what this actually comes to the common mode voltage in this case. Okay. Obviously, as you will be operating your inverter all the time, so these arrows, their locations, they will keep changing. As you will go to the various space vectors, as you will switch your inverter, you will actually go to the various locations all the time. And basically your common mode voltage will keep on varying. So this is only for this particular specific case that I have shown on the left side. Now let us look at the two-level inverter. In the two-level inverter, remember that this is not accessible. Okay, we're talking about a full bridge two-level inverter. Now let's say my A, B, and C, they are all connected to 0. Now the reason is, now if you see a two-level inverter, it can be a space vector controlled two-level inverter. Okay, if you represent the space vector of a two-level inverter, you can see that it will have these various sectors, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like that. And when you switch, you go from one state to another, like that. One state to another, and so on. So this is how you switch. Now, if you're starting from this central point, okay, this vector is given by this 0, 0, 0. So you can see that ABC terminals of this two-level inverter, they are all connected to 0. And if you do this, and if you now use your, this particular notation which I have showed you, you'll find that the common mode index is 0, but they're all 0. It will be 0 plus 0 plus 0 plus into that proportionality constant is all 0. So we just said that this is 0. Actually, this CMI should be closer to this line. So this is 0, and this is also should be closer to this. This is all 0. So we are actually at this level. The inverter is in this state. Now, let's say you want to switch, and so from this point now you switch to this particular point. So you can see it is 200 now. So A has become, you can say it's connected to 2, and B and C are getting connected to 0. All right. So if you do this, and again use the same kind of approach which I have shown you in the previous slides, you actually find that now the CMI, the common mode index, it becomes 2. And likewise, if you will go further switchings, you will get more common mode indices values here. But what you see here, the important thing is that as you switch from one state to another state, okay, you are actually switching by 2Vx by 3. So this is the difference in the voltage that you are having when you are going in a two-level inverter and you're switching from one state to another state, right? This is the difference in voltage that you will see. You will actually have the voltage going from the pole voltage going from here to, very good. Now let us see what happens. So this is the third stage when now you have gone to 2 to 0. You will find that now if you see from this state to this state, the inverter has risen by another 2Vx by 3. So the total from 0 state to this state is 4Vx by 3. So much is the excursion, so much is the variation of the common mode voltage. Now let us see what happens in a three-level inverter. Now in a three-level inverter, your hexagon, the space vector hexagon which I have shown before for a two-level system would actually be having many of them. As you can see, it's a three-level. It will have 24 sectors, and you actually let's say we pick up the action from here, this sector, and we start from 100. So as you can see, A is connected to 1, B and C are connected to 00. And when you put them in the in the original formulas which I have given you, you'll find that the CMI, it actually turns out to be this level, 100. This level is 100, and you can see the common mode voltage is actually would be 1 here. Then you go to the next stage, which is 200. Okay, can you see that now it is 200, and you can see that now you have come to this level, and you will find that your CMI is 2. So basically your common mode voltage has risen from 1 to 2, And you can see that this level rise is only Vx by 3. In case of the two-level system, we had seen that it was 2 Vx by 3. So likewise, if you go to the other cases, like if you go to this particular vector, you find that now you have gone to this particular vector, the common mode voltage. So it has become 3. But if you see, it has risen by only Vx by 3, not 2 Vx by 3. So from the original 0, 0 value to this value, you have only 2 Vx by 3, which has shifted. 2 Vx by 3. Now you know that if I look at the equation for, let's say, transistor of a capacitor, I can say that the Q across the capacitor is nothing but the capacitor into the voltage across the capacitor. All right. Now these common mode voltages, they actually appear across the parasitic capacitances, which actually appear in these systems. So these common mode voltages that we are talking about, they actually appear across those parasitic capacitances. Now we know this Q is equal to CV. It's a basic relationship for a capacitor. If I just do the derivative, I can say that it is nothing but dV by dt. And this is nothing but, as you know, dq by dt is nothing but the current. Okay, so basically what we're trying to say is that because this dV by dt is reduced in a 3-level inverter, you can see that it has become half. In the 2-level inverter, it was 2 Vx by 3, and it was 4 Vx by 3, and so on. Now it is much less. It is half of that. So this dV by dt also will decrease, and therefore this I, which actually is the current that will flow due to the common mode voltage appearing across the parasitic capacitances, will actually also reduce. So that is the main concept. So basically what we have concluded from here, from this explanation, is that these 3-level inverters or the multi-level inverters, they can actually give you advantages in terms of the reduced dV by dt. Also, because there are many of them, these devices which are actually cascaded, unlike a 2-level inverter. Okay, you find that the voltage rating requirement of these switches is less, because there are multi-level, multi-levels appearing in the output voltage. Okay, you will find that the harmonic performance is better. Okay, and we just saw that the common mode voltage is also reduced. So these are very highly desirable features of inverters. So multi-level inverters, typically there are in the most basic form, there are these 3 types: the diode clamp, the flying capacitor, and the cascaded MLI. In the diode clamp and the flying capacitor type, you have these voltages across the capacitors. They have to be balanced. So for that you need to do some control. But as far as the cascaded MLI, the rightmost one is concerned, you actually supply the input, whereas 0.5 VDC is written. That is actually an isolated supply, and you can actually modularly generate them. So that is the balancing of the voltage is not a problem as in the first 2 cases. So we don't really have to worry about balancing the voltage across capacitors. So these are the 3 types, and then there are hundreds of versions which have come after modifying them, which more or less give us the same features as you see on the left side, the 4 important features that I have mentioned. So if you see the issues of the applications with multi-level inverters, we can quickly conclude that compared to 2-level inverters, they have a more complex structure, both in terms of control and the structure itself. They use a higher number of devices of the switches. They use the increased number of isolated sources, or otherwise, if you're not using the cascaded type, if you're using the first 2 type, the diode clamp and the flying type, then you need voltage balancing. And it is for such complexities that we mentioned that MLIs are preferred only for high power applications, typically 1 megawatt to 100 megawatt, that kind of a range. The applications of multi-level inverters currently includes a whole range: motor drives, photovoltaics, wind power, VACs, distributed generation, active filters, STATCOM, HVDC, and train tractions. There's hardly anything that is left actually. Everywhere these multi-level inverters are used. And Some of the commercial industrial examples are, for example, this 3-level NPC, neutral point clamped 27 megawatt um, uh, system, and there is also another one which is the 120 megawatt system, which is made by ABB. I'm sorry, the first one, the 3-level NPC 27 megawatt is by ABB, while this 120 megawatt cascaded bridge type topology is by Siemens. And as I said, the power levels are between 1 megawatt and 100 megawatts, and the voltage levels that you encounter for the devices is 2 kilovolt to 10 kilovolt. So this is the crux. Now the thing is, so what is it that we are talking about here? We are saying that multi-level inverters are good, but they are very complex. And unless you're dealing with very high power, it's not really wise. It's not really worth that you spend your time in making a multi-level inverter. You can probably use a 2-level inverter and get away. But you don't get the kind of features and advantages that the MLI gives you. So you still want to use an MLI. So here we discuss one possibility, that is by use of what are called switched capacitor networks. That we can actually create these multi-level inverters using simple 2-level systems. So these systems, as you will just see the structure, we find that they are able to easily create multiple voltage sources. They are able to reduce the complexity because most of them have inherent voltage balancing capability. And the other are, you can actually do a voltage level generation. You can do voltage boosting, which is a very important characteristic. Given an input voltage, you want to increase the, not only convert it into a low harmonic output voltage, but you also want to boost it. So that kind of application, or that kind of requirement, and a ground isolation. So this is another one where you need actually, you are able to actually implement ground isolation as you'll do when you are using transformers. So let's see how I say or I claim that you can use these switch capacitor multi-level inverters to, or you can say switch capacitor 2-level inverters to get to multi-level inverter properties. So a general structure, as you can see on the switch capacitor network, 2-level, 1-phase and 3-phase inverters is on the left side. And on the right side are some possible structures of the switch capacitor networks. So what you see on the left side diagram in the blocks, so these are these networks, those networks. And I just tell you the properties of these networks. By the way, you can stop me and ask me questions if you have, or you can ask me at the end. I'll try to leave a few minutes at the end so you can have some questions and answers with me. So switch capacitor circuits, if you see here, these are the 3 types I showed on the previous slide. So one of them on the left, the topmost side, you find that it can actually provide voltage boosting. It also has the inherent capacitor voltage balancing. So basically the voltage across C1 and C2 will be balanced. And you can, by having this kind of a network, if you extend it, you can actually have more number of such DC sources that you can create. So you can have C2, C1, C2, C3, and so on up to Cn. The second possibility, of the second configuration of the switch capacitor network, or the SCN, as you can see here, is that if you are turning off S2, you can actually get an isolation. So the output is not connected to the input side. So you can actually have a suitable, yes, please. Is there a question? Okay, so what you can see here is that the switching of S1, S2, S3, S4 can be used to basically achieve ground isolation. So you never have the output side ground connected to the input side ground in this kind of a network. And you also have another one, the third one which I showed in the previous slide, where you have a voltage boosting possible, but its efficiency is not very high. It can give you various voltage levels if you like. So basically you are going to have multiple hexagons. You're talking about space vector representation. And again, you can have many of these. You can extend this network to actually get more multiple, you can say, DC sources. Now, when one of these is connected to a simple, 2-level system, what happens we see now. So we have 2 applications we consider here. The application of the switch capacitor network in a single-phase transformer-less inverter application, and we'll see that it will give us 5 levels in the output voltage. And there's another one which we'll do, which we have actually applied in the lab for 3-phase induction motor drive. So this is just, I'll just skip this slide because this is basically the mechanism how the parasitic capacitance is appearing in solar PV systems. So basically you can see that the chassis is basically local grounded. And so from one of the lines which are actually carrying power from the PV source and down to the chassis, you actually have this parasitic capacitance, CPV, which will actually show up. And actually the common mode voltage, which I mentioned to you, which I described to you with all the details, actually would appear across this. Okay, now if this is not there, as might be the case in some configurations, then it will appear across the parasitic capacitances of the devices, switching devices. But that's a matter of detail and not within the scope of this lecture. But if you are interested, there are several references which actually talk about this. So I will not talk much about this particular thing. This is mostly on the physical presence of the parasitic capacitors. So basically, if you're talking about the transformer-less systems, and you're trying to achieve through 2-level inverters with by connecting them with the SCMs, the switch capacitor network. Basically, here, as I said, because there are no transformers, you want to reduce the leakage current. You want to minimize the minimum the source disconnection period. You want to maximize the DC bus utilization. So that the currents don't go beyond a certain point or threshold. Then possibly you want these inverters to have reactive power feeding capability. You want them to give all the desirable performances that MLI, the multi-level inverter, gives, and you also want to have a complete elimination or minimization of the DC offsets. This is the issue with all the AC systems. If you have asymmetry, then it can cause some sort of an offset, which is not good for the grid to which you are connecting your system or to the load to which you are connecting your system. So this is one example where an SCM, which is actually denoted here by SCB, okay, and this SCB has actually 2 possibilities, 1 and 2. I just discussed this first one, is that connected here with a, as you can see, a 2-level 1-phase H-bridge inverter. Okay, so there is of course a paper that we have published on this. This is how the system works. So you can see on the left side, I've given the matrix, not the matrix, I would say the table, which actually tells the various modes in which the system operates. So just to give you an idea, during mode 1, if you look at the table on the left side, okay, what you have is, it's called the charging mode. And what you do is, you just turn on S5 during this time, S5 and S6. S1 and S4 on the H-bridge side, these are the, I'll just maybe mark here. So this particular switches, they are for the inverter, on the inverter side, but we are talking about the right now on the left side, so this side. So if we just turn on S5 and S6, okay, you will find that your capacitors will charge. These capacitors will charge. And now in the second round, in the second mode, if you of course keep S1, S4 on as before, but now instead of S5 and S6, you turn off S5 and S6, but you turn on S8 and S7. So these ones you turn on. And when this happens, these capacitors C1 and C2 come in parallel and they supply this H-bridge inverter. So likewise, you can actually go on in the various modes, and this is how this operation takes place. So at the output, you do have an AC coming in, feeding power into the grid in this case. Okay. And you can also see, but in this case, the way this system has been designed, the common mode voltage that will appear across, let's say this is a PV source, which will appear across this parasitic capacitance, is actually, as you can see here, this is what we have written here. So this you can find is always minus VDC by 2. You can find out what is the voltage across this by doing some simple KVL and things like that. So you can find that this is almost same. So you can see there is no variation in the common mode voltage. There is no, remember, dq by dt is equal to C dV by dt. Now, when there is no dV by dt, this is all constant, your current, which actually dq by dt, which would have flown in the circuit, the leakage current, okay, that actually has gone to 0. So we have actually got, by using this, as you can see, the switch capacitor network, we have got the desired performance of the of the system. And what are the other desirable performances? Remember, it's a two-level inverter we've used, but with these SCMs, switch capacitor network. Okay, so these are some of the experimental results which I want to share with you. And what you see here is, you look at the output voltage. It is a multi-level output voltage. It's a two-level system, but we are able to get multi-level output from here. And we also saw that we are able to get balanced capacitor voltages. Okay, and you can see that your current, the leakage current, which is shown here, the I leakage, this one is almost zero, because your voltage, as I said, is not changing because the parasitic capacitance, common mode voltage is not changing. So very good results as far as this particular system is concerned. Now there are some more variations of which are possible, but because of the lack of time, I will not be able to do it. But I'll be sharing these slides with you, and if you're interested, you can always refer to these references. And if you still have any questions or this you want to discuss, you are always welcome to talk to me and discuss with me. My email I have given at the end also, but actually it is agarwal@ee.iitb.ac.in. There is another application which I wanted to show you. You know, these are these induction motors drives. So usually now people are talking about solar PV and battery driven systems. So usually these will have 24 volts or 48 volts. So what we see here is basically a switch capacitor network system, which we have used in this particular case to provide, a DC voltage to the inverter. Now in this case, it's a three-phase, two-level inverter, which is then driving a induction motor drive. But by the way, this is what you see here is a boost stage. So usually because of the low voltages, and you know these voltages that may be required here will be 230 volts and so on, you would need boosting. So there is a boost stage that you use typically. Now here, if you want to use CCM, the continuous conduction mode, but that will have low ripple, you would like to increase the value of inductor. So that's how it will cause CCM. And if it is not possible to increase the L value, then your switching frequency should increase. In both the cases, you will actually end up increasing the losses. So therefore, this particular, you can see the option that we have given by connecting the SCM network to a two-level three-phase inverter. And this is feeding a induction motor drive. So now you can see here that when S1 dash is conducting, you will find that the VDC charges this C, as you can see here. So VDC is charging this. And when your S1 is conducting, you can see that your VDC and this capacitor, they come in parallel. So these are called modes 1 and mode 2, and they result in, you can see this very peculiar hexagon now, which is actually having two layers. One of them is the original one with the two-level system, but because of the presence of this SCM network here, you have this additional layer, the external layer, which is also there. And these are the vectors that are associated with them. And what we do is, when we are operating with the in mode 1, you are dealing with this particular hexagon, and when you are operating in mode 2, that time you are dealing with the outside one, and that is the time when your capacitor voltage will be higher. So actually you are able to level generate. You can actually have multiple levels of the DC voltage that you can apply in this case. So this is how the PWM is actually discussed, but unfortunately I don't really have that much of time, so I'll just skip this. The other, of course, these are some of the experiments that we did, simulations that we did, and they actually gave us quite nice results. When we drove the induction motor with it, it gave us a very low ripple torque that we saw, and also gave low THD in the current. So this is that the results. The low, we're talking about the red one, which is what we have implemented with the SCM, which I just showed you, and the blue one is the existing solution. So you can see that the torque ripple has reduced, and the phase current THD also has reduced. It gives us advantages, just what the MLI, the multi-level inverter, would give, even though we've used a two-level, three-phase inverter. Further CMV reduction is possible in configurations, and that also we have done, but because of lack of time, I'm not really harp on that. Right now, we'll not dwell on these particular topics, but again, I'll be giving my slides here for you to refer to it. And if you have any questions, you can always refer to the papers, or you can always talk to me. The other applications which I wanted to actually tell you were the modified modular multi-level converters and the grid support. So the modified modular multi-level here is basically, you can see the basic idea comes from the multi-level inverters only. But as you can see, it is actually made up of like this. So for one of the phases, which is the front one, which is shown in the peach color, you have the upper arm and the lower arm. And there is a windmill somewhere here. So there is a windmill here somewhere. Okay, somewhere here there is a windmill, and this is the ocean. And the windmill is actually mounted in somewhere in the deep into the sea, because the breeze is very high here. Okay, so you want to take full advantage of, you want to trap as much energy as possible from the wind. And then after this, you convert this into a DC. So first it goes to a generator, and then you actually convert it to DC. And because this is very high power, it actually, you can actually form what is called a HVDC link. So several kilovolts HVDC link. So it comes here, and now on the left side, what you see is your grid, your actual grid, which is there on the land where we live. So this particular system, what you see here, multi-modular multi-level inverter system, it actually converts this DC into AC. So it's a multi-modular multi-level inverter actually, if you see. So there are papers which I have referred to, and if you are interested in looking at its work, you can see that each of these, you can see the switching modules here, the sub module SM is actually looking like this. So you can see that there are two versions of each of these switches SMs. One of them is a full bridge, the other is a half bridge. In full bridge, you have both. You have all these SW1, SW2, 3, and 4, along with this capacitor in the middle. But if you have only half bridge version, then only these two are there. So these two are there. SW1 and SW2 are there, and the capacitor is there. So the input is P into the system, and output is here, Q. So this P and Q in the half bridge case will become P and Q. In the full bridge case, P and Q are like this. P is here and Q is here. So you operate them, and they each produce a small DC, AC from AC with a DC offset. Each of them. So they are so switched that they produce this, and then eventually, because of the operation of the circuit, this is only for the first phase. Similarly, the yellow one and the blue one for the other two phases. You add up these voltages, and you can actually get the three-phase AC voltages, which are then fed through some proper filter arrangement, or these could be part of the line itself. The line may have parasitic inductance that itself, or it may be having legitimate inductance that may be enough. So that is how the power is fed into this AC side. So these are the some advantages. The advantage of this system that we proposed is that what you see in the shaded portion here and here, this particular sub-module, which is this time, okay, it can be only full bridge. So basically, it can support, the capacitor can support both positive and negative voltage, while these SNs could be half bridge. So they can support only positive, each of them. So basically, we've shown that by actually having this arrangement, it is possible to boost the voltage. So whatever voltage you are getting here, you can actually, when you bring it to the AC side, you can actually boost that voltage. So there's no transformer, and yet you are able to boost. The transformer is bulky, so you're able to reduce the price, the footprint, the weight, and so on, volume, and so on. So these are really the systems that will obviously look attractive. Okay, so I'll just maybe take another maybe a couple of minutes, and
requesting all participants to mute. Requesting all participants to mute.
the hydrogen.
So these are some of the simulations of multi-modular system, and these are some of the experimental results. It was actually big hardware because of the large number of devices, the
Yes.
models which are used. So you actually have, yes?
Sir, I will mute all. You can unmute yourself because
One
many have unmuted. I will mute all. You can unmute yourself, sir.
yeah, but I think I'm about to be done.
Okay.
I'm almost done. I'll mute. Whatever you say, I'll do. Okay.
Yeah. You can continue, sir.
One second. But I'm not muted.
I have made you present there. No, it's okay. You can continue, sir.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. 1 second. So you can see the slides anyway. I hope. Okay, so I have discussed many of these applications with you and some of these things that we experimented with in the lab. Various options. I discussed also this off-grid, I would say, offshore wind system, where you're trapping energy from the wind in the sea, and in the form of a high HVDC tank, you're getting it onto the shore. And I just described to you the main points of the system. Of course, there are other very important aspects today where power electronics again has huge application is the distributed generation. So what you can see here is a distributed generation system where you actually have a power source which could be a solar PV or it could be a small hydro fuel cells or anything. And this is the filter which is used at the output of the voltage source inverter. And this is connected to the point of VCC. And further down there, you have the line resistance and inductor in the grid. So what you find is that because of because of the nature of the system, R and L need to be estimated. There are many ways in which you can actually eliminate, you can actually estimate R and L. So you know whether your grid is mostly inductive or resistive or a resistive inductive. That will determine whether you need to feed a reactive power component only, or you have to feed reactive power component only, or you have to feed both. So now that people are talking about this kind of a support system and distributed generation at the distribution level. Earlier it was at the transmission level where the voltages were high and the grid was mostly inductive. And there you could actually just manage to give reactive power to regulate your voltage. But here, now at the distribution level, you will have to probably give both active and reactive powers. So what happens is that during the distributed generation, what happens is that when there is a fault on the grid, so when there is a fault on the grid, this system, it senses it and it tries to disconnect itself. And that is even what is the mandate of standards like IEEE 1547 and so on. But what happens if it will disconnect from here? Okay, while this voltage has gone down temporarily because of some local disturbance, what will happen? Because of this withdrawing, suddenly there will be a sudden further drop of the voltage. Because of that, some other systems which might be connected in the vicinity, they may also withdraw and try to cut off. So what is currently the new regime of the low voltage, what we call low voltage right through, it actually wants that the inverter, even after something has happened on the grid, it continues to supply power for some time. Okay, so that chain reaction of the tripping of all the other systems on the distribution generation, then it doesn't start. Okay, so this is the way it works. And basically what we have done is we have just tried to find out what kind of reference currents are required, and then you use some hysteresis control or some reference frame transformation to generate the control signals to control your inverter in such a way that you're able to feed the desired current into the grid, whether it is the active component or the reactive component, so that you are able to maintain the grid for some time as far as you are concerned, and that is your LVRT obligation. And likewise, the other people also have to do. And then they wait for some time, and if the grid is coming back, doesn't trip, then you know that you don't have to really trip. You can continue. But if the grid still remains bad, then your system will have to trip. So we have just talked about two systems where you are providing voltage support at VCC through power electronics. So this is all power electronics on the left side, what you see. And these are some of the experimental results and so on. So I'll stop here. These are some of the schemes that I mentioned. These are references that you can use for further study the material or for further understanding on the material that I presented. Please ask me questions if you have any. I'll be glad to answer your questions.
Participants, if you have any doubts, please ask. Please unmute yourself and then ask questions.
Good morning, sir.
Yes, please.
Sir, I wanted to know the reason, like why we want to estimate that R and L in the network for that grid support thing, sir.
That is because we would know only then what is the nature of the grid, whether it is highly inductive or highly active or what it is. And if it is only after that we know the nature of the grid, then only we can decide how we will support the grid.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Any other question, please?
Sir, this application for this multi-level inverter, is it mainly on the three-phase part? Is it single-phase applications also?
Mainly three-phase, but what we have done is we have tried to show single-phase cases also.
Yes.
Where we have tried to use multi-level performance.
But major applications like...
Yeah, mainly three-phase.
Okay.
Any other doubts? Okay, shall we wind up this session then? So thank you, sir, for giving an overview of power electronic devices and various applications that include multi-level inverter for low power applications, switched capacitor circuits, transformerless systems, and drives. Thank you once again for accepting our invitation and delivering a session for our FDP. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much. My apologies again for the delay in the beginning, and probably because of that shortage of time, I had to run a little fast. But students, the participants, they are welcome to contact me on email, and I would be glad to answer their questions if they have any queries regarding the technical part. And I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to your participants and to interact with them. I wish the course a grand success. Thank you very much. I'll disconnect now.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Yes. And participants, that feedback link is posted in the chat box and also posted in the WhatsApp group. Please give your feedback. And after 10 minutes break, like by 11:30, please join session 2 meeting link.
Mini ma'am, please download that.
I'm trying. Okay.
I hope the link is visible to all of you in the chat.
Hello, ma'am.
Yeah. Yes.
Ma'am, can you share the recordings of all the sessions after FDP?
Yes, we will be sharing that.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that the feedback link is visible, but not able to log in now to give the feedback.
now from this Teams, if you are just clicking on the link, is it not able to open the form? Sir?
No, ma'am. Again, it runs into some logging kind of issue, ma'am. I tried logging in, but it says more information required something, ma'am.
As
So
per
when
my
you get more information required, at that time you can re-enter the same credentials again. That will make you through.
I did that,
also,
but it's
I
asking
also
me.
face the same issue. But once you type in the same credentials, second time it will accept your form.
Okay, I'll try that.
Excuse me, ma'am, my chat box itself is not visible, ma'am.
Ma'am, whether you will be able to do something for that.
I think it is from your side, maybe it is disabled.
Yeah,
Because
can you
for
just
other meeting- yeah.
can you raise your
Yeah.
hand? Then we will try.
Yes, ma'am. It's visible, ma'am,
Yeah.
now?
Yeah, Priyashri.
Yeah, Priyashri. Yes, ma'am, Priyashri. Yes.
Mini ma'am? Mini Rajiv ma'am?
Ma'am, on mobile, chat box will not be there. Mobile.
Okay. So then,
What is the issue? I was
Okay,
calling
then
them
it means I need to log in through laptop.
yeah, no, otherwise actually that login is provided, the form is provided already
required,
pasted
ma'am.
in the
Even then,
WhatsApp
through
also.
WhatsApp, at least it can work, I suppose, ma'am.
What is the issue, Mini? I was calling the other speaker, Mini. You tell me what is the issue? It is solved.
No, actually Priyashri is login through the mobile. So she's not able to see the chat box. So then I think what she can do is that either she may be able to use the WhatsApp, right? From the WhatsApp.
Yeah, link is there in WhatsApp also.
Chat box
Are you able to do
chat
that?
link is not a.
Pardon? Rajendra, please. Yeah.
Ma'am, it was not in the chat box, but it was in the posts.
Okay. So that means we have to
So
give
through
it
post, I filled it.
Okay, but it is. We will just post it again then.
Should I post it in the WhatsApp group, ma'am?
Yes, yeah.
You've
Please.
already posted, Rajendra.
Acha, posted.
And chat box I can see here, Rajendra.
My chat box.
Not there.
In my chat box, I'm not able.
In the chat, you are not able to see, Rajendra?
In the chat, ma'am, I can see that recording, 36 minutes record.
Only that
Progression.
is the other one, that feedback link which I have posted is not seen?
No. Feedback link I accessed through.
Oh, okay. I'll just see. We'll just see for the next session at least what is the issue.
Ma'am,
Should I always log in through laptop? Because my regular classes are in Teams through laptop. That is the reason I did it in my mobile.
No, you have to come out of that and log in with the new login ID and password.
Then my old login ID, this is my regular college work, so that I can't take it out.
No, you can't. You can't use that here.
No, that's the reason I am logging in through mobile, because in my laptop I need my college this one ID.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that is my problem, because I need to take classes.
Another browser you try, no? To log in through another browser.
That's not possible. For one laptop, there is only one option available, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that is the reason. And through WhatsApp, if I click through WhatsApp chat, that is not possible.
Hello, madam.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Madam, if you are opening in browser, you can use multiple login. Even though it is open in your MS Teams software, it will open in browser.
Okay.
Simultaneously, two Teams we can open.
At least you can try, madam. You can try and see.
I will try, because because my regular classes and everything will get deleted, I thought.
No. It will not get deleted. You're opening in a different browser, no?
Yes. Okay. I will try and get back, because I am not able to send it through WhatsApp also.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that is why. Because from WhatsApp it is supposed to be possible, right?
Okay.
Yeah, through WhatsApp also.
Ma'am, Priyadarsh, ma'am.
Yeah, yes. Tell me, ma'am.
Ma'am, if you are using mobile, if it is no, even if you are not in the Teams, in the Teams actually the general section is there,
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
in that general section, actually, this link will be available always.
Okay.
So you will be able to, even if the chat box is not available, from the general section, with this link, by using mobile itself, you will be able to do the, you will be able to fill the form.
Yes, yes, yes. I'll try that, ma'am. No, ma'am, same problem again. I went to general, I click on the link, and it is asking me, you don't have permission. You need to create your own form.
Okay, but then you had logged in with our credential.
Yeah, same thing. Yes, ma'am. I actually sent you the screenshot of the login ID.
Yeah.
So
And
in my mobile, there is no other.
One second. I will join the other session. Sir has already joined.
Okay. Yeah, I will take care of it. Yeah. Okay. And ma'am, in your mobile also, whether you were accessing your college Teams?
No, ma'am. I have taken out all other Teams in my mobile.
Okay. Only
you
this
just
thing.
see, ma'am. You just see. This is what I'm able to see. I sent it in WhatsApp, ma'am.
Okay, 1 minute.
In the WhatsApp team, I have sent it this photo. See, I'm able to see the forms. I can click on the forms. But again, the same problem it is giving. Here also.
Yeah, after clicking the form, again what you are seeing is that again it is asking for credentials, or you are saying
no, not credentials. It is telling you are not permitted. I am not permitted to
whether the
submit the form. Is there a time for that, ma'am?
Yeah, ma'am, what is your login ID? Means FDP?
1 minute. FDP, I'll tell you, ma'am. 1 minute.
No, but we will do that. We will take care of that thing, ma'am. You please don't worry about that. I will note it down.
Yes.
And anyway, we downloaded that timestamp, na? So in that it will be visible. Whoever is joining and leaving.
Correct.
Everything. We will take care. We will.
Sure.
We will compare that also, ma'am.
Okay. I'll try to log in. We'll log in for the second session, ma'am. I'll
Yes,
get back
ma'am.
to
Yes,
this
ma'am.
later.
Yeah. This we will
Thank
take
you,
care. You don't have to worry, ma'am.
Yes. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you. Thank
yes, ma'am. Yes.
Other people, yeah. Hello, Sushil sir, Deepankar sir, and you can join with the second session.
Okay, ma'am. Okay.
Yeah, because that another link is provided, session 2, like that. There you will be able to. Even if the attendance even if the attendance you were not able to submit, we will take care of that thing from the timestamp, sir.
Ma'am, is there any attendance in first session?
No, attendance first session was same as that of the feedback we asked, right? Feedback form.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, feedback form is the attendance.
Yeah, and in addition to that thing, we will be downloading. We have already downloaded the timestamp also, so we will be getting that thing also, right? Attendance from the timestamp also, sir.
Okay.
Yeah. So that we will compare both the things, sir. Yeah.
Okay, ma'am. When the next session will start?
And now it is starting, sir. 11:30.
Okay.
Yeah, session 2 it is, please, sir.
Okay.
Yeah. Sir, I hope all of you are leaving this session and joining with the session 2.
Ma'am, link is already given in the group, or same link?
No, sir, different link. Yeah, session 2 link is right now provided now.
Okay, ma'am. Okay.
Yeah, it is there in the WhatsApp group right now.
Okay.
Yeah.